Hi, Walter Brown and the Magician's Hat. We are on chapter 5, and it's called Warriors on the Loose. It's on page 37. Page 37, chapter 5, Warriors on the Loose. So warriors are fighters, like soldiers. So they are loose. So remember in chapter 4, the warriors were in the video game. Now where are the warriors? The warriors are the characters in the video games. Page 37, Warriors on the Loose. Inside the Braithwaite's cinema room, all conversation had stopped after Sixth Sense had left the window ledge. Harry, George, and little Thomas Braithwaite all watched in silence as on the faraway planet of Voss, the Crystal Warrior King of the Iceberg Kingdom, controlled by Harry, prepared to lead his army of white crystal warriors into battle against the flaming fire fiends from the volcano island, commanded by George. So there are two armies on the video game, two groups of warriors, two groups of fighters. One are the fire fighters, the fire people, and one are the ice people over here, ice. So it's ice fighting fire. So they're called the Ice Crystal Warrior King from the Iceberg Kingdom, and the White Crystal Warriors. Those are the White Crystal Warriors. And then we have the Flaming Fire Fiends, the fire from Volcano Island. So these two groups are going to fight. Wide grins appeared on the boys' faces as the Crystal Warrior King bellowed, "Crystal Freeze attack!" signaling the start of the battle, the start of the fight. Harry pressed his controller button, he's playing his video game. Instantly, white crystal warriors snapped into teams of 4 interlocking ice crystals, each group ready to attack the army of flaming fire fiends, which approached in the single file from the ridge of the iceberg. "Ace!" shouted little Thomas from between his brothers as the lead team of white crystal warriors hurled itself into the first oncoming fire fiend, freezing it into a flamed-shaped ice block. So right now we have a battle between the ice and the fire. The ice and the fire. "Die!" yelled Harry, jabbing at his controller as one of his shimmering ice warriors broke free from the formation and plunged itself into the frozen fire fiend, just to be sure no flames lingered inside. "Revenge!" bellowed George, purple-faced, as he thumb-punched his controller in a frenzy, already summoning his next fire fiend. "Go, go!" said Thomas, as Harry's next team of white crystal warriors lined up, ready to take on the second fire fiend that was now blasting across the ice towards them. But then, quite suddenly, something strange happened. Instead of hurling themselves at the second flaming fire fiend, the second team of white crystal warriors turned to face Harry, George, and Thomas, where they were sitting on the sofa. "Coming out!" yelled their team leader, fixing an icy stare through the screen onto Harry. Before Harry could react, the interlocking group of 4 white crystal warriors propelled itself towards the television screen and smashed right through it into the living room, sending glass crackling, splintering to the ground. So the video game people came out of the video game through the TV screen, through this right here. They came out, and they broke the TV. The breakout had separated the 4 white crystal warriors from their formation and they now paused mid-air, side by side, to shake their loosened frost particles onto the carpet. Onwards, commanded the lead warrior in a high voice as he glared at all three boys down his sparkling nose. Then he shot sideways across the room, up and out of the half-open window, with the rest of his team in his wake. What? They came out of the TV, they ran across the room, and they went out the window. Whoa, what's going on? Cried Harry, staring in bewilderment as he followed the path of the white crystal warriors out of the open window. They've smashed the TV, gasped George. Awesome, shouted Thomas, eyes wide as the last warrior disappeared. A high-pitched whizzing filled the room. The magic. Harry, George, and Thomas swiveled their heads back towards the smashed TV to find the whole army of white crystal warriors, followed up at the rear by Crystal Warrior King himself, queuing up and propelling themselves out of the hole in the middle of the screen. Pum, pum, pum. So the whole army's jumping out of the TV. Out they came, one after another, their frosty, glittering eyes filled with panicked excitement. As each one burst through, it paused mid-air to shake clouds of white frost to the ground before being sucked up across the room sideways and whooshed out of the window. So you can see here in this picture on page 40, you can see the characters coming out of the television, the Frost Army, the Crystal Ice Warriors, the Crystal Ice Warriors. So they're made from ice. And they're coming out of the television screen. It's very surprising, very surprising. In less than 30 seconds, the Crystal Ice Warriors and their king were gone. A layer of frost covered the carpet, and the three boys sat shivering and shocked into a brief silence. The fire fiends are coming. So now this army is coming, right? The fire one is coming. Thomas, his face bright red, almost launched off the sofa from his sitting position. Oh, it got dark in here. All three boys' faces contorted with terror as they stared back at the screen. The flaming fire fiends, who had continued to appear over the ridge of the iceberg, were scrambling around trying to work out where the enemy had gone when their leader spotted the hole in the television screen. The ice warriors have escaped, it bellowed in a breathy roar, pointing at the screen and belching orange, green, and red flames. Onwards and out to the meltdown. The well-trained army of flaming fire fiends instantly huddled together to form a single multi-headed fireball, then charged at the television screen. Harry, George, and Thomas shrieked, "Ah!" and cupped their hands over their faces, leaving just enough space between their fingers to see what was happening. Ah! They were scared. As the ball of flaming heads shot out through the hole, raged across the living room towards them, and in the last split second zoomed sideways up and out the window, narrowly avoiding slamming into them. Fire! Fire! Shouted Thomas, even though the moment had passed. So fire, this one, fire, fire. Arg! What's that? Harry felt something wet and prickling starting to attack his feet. He looked down. The heat thrown out by the fireball had melted the white carpet of frost left by the white crystal warriors, leaving pools of water mixed with shattered glass, which was now seeping into his socks. So his socks were getting wet because all the ice got melted because of the fireball. George looked down and raised his own dripping feet from the soaked rug beneath him. Ugh, this sucks. Footsteps thumped along the hallway. Who's coming? Uh-oh, said Harry. Oh dear, said George. The door flung open. What on earth is going on? Mrs. Braithwaite's voice was so high it seemed to squeeze out from the top of her throat. So their mom came in. A brief silence filled the room as she stared, aghast, at the shattered television screen and the three agitated boys, all red in the face. It blew up, said Harry. By itself, added George, flicking Harry a stern sideways glance. She'd never believe the truth. Harry nodded in agreement, quickly putting on the blank stare he always used when he was telling half-truths. The monsters broke it, said Thomas in his helpful voice. The twins groaned and rolled their eyes, knowing that a bad situation had just got a whole lot worse. This glass is lethal, boys. Outside, now. It's poisonous, it's dangerous. Mrs. Braithwaite's cheek had turned as red as traffic lights, which everyone knew was not a good sign. It usually only happened when she couldn't remember her lines. Remember, she's an actress. And I suggest you get your story straight on what really happened. Dad's back in a half an hour and we'll need an explanation. Thomas skipped past their mother out of the room. Harry and George followed, their cheeks now white, each trying to think of how to explain away the smashed TV. How did the TV get smashed? How can they tell their mother that the Warriors came out of the TV? I don't know. Page 43. The time that passed between the first white crystal warrior turning to stare out of the television set at Harry and the multi-headed fireball monster finally disappearing out the window was no more than 1 minute, although it seemed a lot longer to everyone involved. During this time, Walter had stood across the road with his eyes and his mouth expanding into ever larger circles. Very surprised. Finally, when he saw the white crystal warriors zooming up towards the window and heading in his direction, he'd had enough. This is too much, Sixth Sense. Make it stop, he shouted. With that, Walter ceremoniously lifted his top hat from his head about 10 centimeters and hoped that everything would return back to normal. Put it back on, put it back on, cried Sixth Sense, but Walter, of course, couldn't hear her because he didn't have the hat on. The white crystal warriors were still streaking in Walter's direction. Into the hat, regroup, commanded the crystal warrior king from the rear. With his crystal clear vision, he could spot a safe haven at any distance. So you see, they're going back. They're going to go into Walter's hat. The crystal warriors are going into Walter's hat. Before Walter had time to blink, the whole army of white crystal warriors had skimmed over the top of his head and gone whistling high up inside his top hat, leaving his eyebrows dusted with frost. In panic, Walter snapped the magician's hat hard onto his head. The fire fiends, get the fire fiends, shouted Sixth Sense. Feeling the approaching heat, Walter looked up to see the multi-headed fireball monster hurtling towards him. Obediently, he whisked off his hat, and in it zoomed, melting the frost of his eyebrows as it went. Then snap, down came the hat into Walter Brown's head. So all the fire fiends and the ice warriors are all in his hat. Silence followed as Sixth Sense sat trembling with excitement, staring up at Walter. Then slowly, building up from the inside the hat, came a hissing, fizzing, bubbly noise. This was quickly followed by dense jets of steam that spurted from under the brim, giving Walter the appearance of a magician whose trick had just spectacularly backfired. So when you have the fire and the ice, you get the steam, the water coming out of his head. Walter groaned. Oh, his head and his hair were soaked, full of water. And very quickly, warm water started pouring from the inside of his hat down his face, over the tips of his ears, and down the back of his neck. Brilliant, cried Sixth Sense. They've extinguished each other. Now that is clever magic. Clever? Cried Walter. Just look at me, will you? My head feels disgusting. Sixth Sense fur suddenly stood on end. The twins are about to come out, she whispered. What? There's no way I want to meet them now, said Walter, glaring. Let's get out of here. Walter and Sixth Sense dashed back down the road and were out of sight just before the boys opened their front door. That was chapter 5. Sounds like that was a very, very messy magic trick.